guides to getting started homeschooling in Maryland. So there's a section on knowing your rights and responsibilities, and it goes through what the homeschool regulations are in the state of Maryland, which are fairly clear and easy to understand. There's a section on picking your homeschool curriculum, and it points out that Maryland doesn't require a specific curriculum. Families can use any curriculum of their choice or no curriculum and DIY your own, as long as whatever you choose to work with provides. The language in the law in Maryland is regular, thorough instruction to your children.
Jill, I'm just going to can I interrupt you for 1 second? I just want to let everyone know that we are recording the event this evening, and I did go ahead and push that button.
You.
Yep.
Thank you, Catherine. I meant to do that at the beginning. And then there's a section about choosing your form of oversight. If you click on the button there when you're viewing this on your own, it'll go into more detail. But basically in Maryland, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either have oversight from the local school system, which is what most of our families here in St. Mary's County choose, where you'll meet with somebody from the Board of Education a few times a year to review what learning your children have been doing at home. But the other option available that some families choose is to work with an umbrella school or an umbrella group, which is an organization other than your local school board that will do your reviews and certify to the state your children are learning. It talks about the notice of intent form, which we'll show you where to get that on our next website. This is the paperwork that you need to file in order to let the school system know that your child is going to learn at home and not be enrolled in a school, basically. And then the final thing, and not everyone knows this, but in Maryland, there's basically a 2-week waiting period between when you file that paperwork, your notice of intent to homeschool, and then you don't officially begin homeschooling for 2 weeks. And I suppose that is just to give the school system time to process the paperwork and so forth. You can take your children out of school the day you submit the form, and right now school is not in session, so that's moot, but they don't actually consider you to have been officially started homeschooling for at least 14 days after you turn in that form. So, and there are more details elsewhere on the site. But that is, let me copy. Actually, we'll send the links to everyone who participated at the end. I think that's probably the easiest way. And the next website we wanted to show you, this is, I know we have some folks from all over the state that have joined us tonight, so welcome everyone. But this is specifically St. Mary's County's public schools, and they have a page on their website about home instruction. So it has a summary of your rights and responsibilities if you're going to be doing homeschooling, and then there are links to those forms. So there's the home instruction change of status form and the home instruction. Okay, the first one you need is home instruction notification form. That's this one here. And if you have more than one child of school age in your household, you will fill out one of the home instruction notification form, and you'll put the first child's information on that form, and then there's a second one, home instruction notification additional students form, and that's just an extra little section for each student. So if you have 2 children in the home, you'll fill out one notification form and one additional student form for the second child, and so on. So those are all available with explanation on the St. Mary's County home instruction page. And then they also have links to some helpful videos. There's a video on the home instruction process in Maryland that's a really good overview. So I definitely recommend taking some time to look at that. For even more detail and resources about getting started and continuing with homeschool, this is the state level Maryland State Department of Education website on home instruction. So they've got some fact sheets. There's a video series, Initiating Home Instruction, basically how to get started, components of a home instruction program, and special topics for high school age students. That one is especially valuable for folks that are looking towards graduation and going on to work or secondary education. And really useful is on the right-hand side, they have a lot of great resources. So if you are from a county other than St. Mary's County and you want to find your local school system's contact information for how to file that notice of intent to homeschool, there's a list of all of the local homeschooling coordinators for each school district. And then they have some great resources. They have a guide to homeschooling organizations and support groups, frequently asked questions, the Maryland Home Education Association, and Maryland Homeschool Association that we already showed you, and some others to look at. So spend some time on that site as well. And then here is another one. This is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They have a lot of excellent resources. They also have a Getting Started guide and different guides for if you have a child with special needs, high school and beyond, how to keep your records, different things of topics. Just one thing to keep in mind as you explore the Homeschool Legal Defense Association site is that they are nationwide. So, you know, they take a very broad approach. They're covering, you know, lots of different states with lots of different regulations. And also that their original purpose is they're an advocacy organization. So they're really oriented towards, you know, promoting and defending the right to homeschool and things. So just be aware that that's a big part of their mission, as well as just education for families and mutual support. And last, we wanted to share that a common question we get in the library from homeschooling families or potential homeschooling families is how to find each other. How do you connect with other homeschoolers? And if you are someone who uses social media, there are many very active groups and pages for homeschoolers on Facebook. So this is just a quick look at the results. If you are on Facebook and you search for Southern Maryland homeschooling and groups, there are many pages of results. And so you can take a look at some of those and find the ones that are suitable for you and your family. And last but not least, we also wanted to share, this is just one example, there are many others out there of online magazines for ideas and resources for your homeschooling. And this is one that is actually published locally from a group in Charles County. It's called Rosemary Magazine, and it's a magazine especially for homeschoolers. So that is just a quick tour of some great resources for getting started. All right, let me stop my screen share there.
We had a question from somebody specifically about the homeschool paperwork. So I thought, go ahead and look at that one now. Wanted to know if you can start homeschooling. Can you start homeschooling if you have received your paperwork back from the school confirming homeschool for the year? If you've already received it, can you start?
It is my understanding that you can start 14 days after you have submitted it, whether you heard from them or not. Now, I should caveat that by saying neither I, nor Ms. Catherine, nor any of our lovely panelists are lawyers, and we cannot give you legal advice. But we can share information and the best ways to find information with you. So according to the best information we have from these resources, you can do that.
All right, it looks like Angie, I see you've put some information in the chat. I think it's only being sent to the panelists right now.
So if you, Angie said, see non-public entities registered to supervise families in need. And she says you can start anytime, but it doesn't count towards, you know, if anybody cares
as a parent
to record the amount of time. Oh, go ahead, Angie.
All the time, right? So you're always educating as a parent. And yeah, I was pointing out that on that MSDE site, there's actually a list of umbrella programs that are legally able to supervise you. I don't know if Jill wants to go back to that. It was midway down the page. And if you click on that, there are local groups and you can find those and contact them. Oh, and then HSDLA, they have scholarship money for families who are in significant need. And if you are interested in that, you can look around on their website, or if someone puts it in the chat, I can find a link for you.
So this is what Angie was pointing out. If you are wanting to pursue the option of using an umbrella organization to do your reviews versus working with the local school board, this link here on the MSDE website, non-public entities registered to supervise home instruction, that is state government speak for umbrella groups. So that is where you would find the different groups that you could register with. Most of them do charge a fee, and some of them have their own requirements for what you need to teach, but that is where you would find the list of eligible entities that can help you with that. All right, so that is enough from us non-homeschooling librarians. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Somebody asked, are all umbrella groups religious? And do umbrella groups do anything other than reviews with them as opposed to with the county? That is an excellent question. The answer, based on what I've learned in my research, is that a lot of umbrella groups are religious. Many of them are associated with the education ministry of a religious organization, but not all. There are secular umbrella groups and schools out there, and what they offer varies. Some just do your reviews. Some provide other things like recommended curriculum and parent support groups and different things. So you really just need to explore what each one offers in order to find one that would be good for you. All right. So, Catherine, shall we take turns asking the panelists our questions? And then you three ladies, Candace, Carrie, and Angie, you can just, you know, you can pass if it doesn't apply to you and your experience, or you can speak up as one does. So Catherine, you want to go first and ask the first question?
Yeah. Okay. And Jill, should we save, I think the plan was we were going to save our Q&A questions till the end. So we're not going to, I know that there are some questions down there. Please keep putting them there. We're just not going to address them until the end.
Yes. So okay. Please, folks, if you have questions that you want to ask to our panelists, use the Q&A feature. We'll also try to catch them in the chat. And then when we get to our last, say, 10 minutes or so, we'll do the audience questions if they haven't already been covered by that time. All righty?
All right. So our first question, I would just love to ask our panelists today to introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been homeschooling, ages of the children that you teach, and when you started, and ages of your kids when you started homeschooling, and how old are they now? And Candace, is it okay if I start?
Yes, I can go first. My name's Candace Levin, and this is my 11th year of homeschooling. I am homeschooling, I have twin girls. I started them in kindergarten, and they are now 15 years old, almost 16.
I'll go next, I guess. Can you, am I on? I think I'm on.
Yes, you are on. We can hear you.
Okay. I'm Carrie Morrison. I have inadvertently become a bit of a career homeschool mom. I've been homeschooling for almost 20 years without interruption. I have 6 kids between the ages of 16 and 24. So I have 3 who are, well, 2 who are college graduates. They have their bachelor's degree. 1 who just finished his associate's degree and just moved into his apartment at a university to complete his bachelor's. And then I have 2 high school seniors, and they're twins, and I have a high school junior. So I guess in 3 more years, I'm going to be looking for a new career.
And I've known Carrie and her 6 wonderful kids since she was bringing them to the library for story time. So she's been in this game a long time. Yeah. Angie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Angelina Pruscia, and I have been homeschooling. My 16-year-old was in the 1st grade. Haven't really thought through how long it's been. So my children are now 7, 14, and 16. And I've been homeschooling all those years.
Awesome. So our next question for the panel is, what made you decide to homeschool, and what were the things that factored into your decision? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first this time. So,
okay.
Rachel, my oldest, is 16, and she was not challenged in school. I have nothing negative to say about the teachers, the administration, the school itself, nothing. The school was lovely. I had them in private Christian school when they were younger, and then put her in public school. But she just wasn't challenged, and she wasn't doing what I knew she could do. And as a parent, you know what your children are capable of. So that and a few other, social concerns. I wanted a more peaceful home life. They come home from school, they're exhausted. It's 4 o'clock, they fall off the bus, they're mad, they're grumpy. You have to rush them through the morning to get them dressed and ready. And one day I was fussing at my kids and saying, stop talking and eat your breakfast. And I was like, this isn't what I want life to be like. They were trying to have a polite conversation over breakfast and they didn't have time, and there was homework that was really busy work for her. And I was up doing homework until 7:30, had to put him in bed. There was just no family time. So it was those two factors. And when I pulled her out and started homeschooling her, and that question of when can you start homeschooling, I didn't pull her out. We finished the school year. I started immediately that summer. I registered sometime during the summer, but I immediately started teaching her handwriting and reading books with her. And before I knew it, her handwriting had improved dramatically, her attitude improved dramatically. She doubled her reading level, all in a matter over the summer before we even started the school year. So I saw immediate benefits. And then it was the obvious choice with my other two to continue on the journey.
Okay, thank you. Carrie or Candace, you want to share your decision-making journey?
Sure. I guess I'm a little ashamed to say that the two main reasons probably that set me looking at homeschooling were money and control. I really wanted my kids, I'm a fan of Montessori education. I really wanted my kids to go to a Montessori school, and we couldn't afford it. And I was also a teacher. I was an elementary education major and taught before I had kids. So the thought of leaving my kids in a classroom that wasn't my first choice of what type of classroom was a little beyond my ability for letting go of the control, and I would have been a terrible parent to some poor classroom teacher. So I started exploring homeschooling largely for those reasons, and once we started, I loved it. I mean, I just saw a lot of growth, and just had a ton of fun just being with my kids all day, and being the one to lead and guide and explore interests and other things with them. So I haven't looked back.
Awesome.
Well, we started thinking about homeschooling because actually we have two older children that are adults now, like with kids. And they were only like a year apart in school, but they had completely different experiences. Like our oldest lost the love of learning and then got in with the wrong crowd. And then our second did great academically, but he wasn't challenged really either. He could have done so much more. I mean, he was like third in his class, but he didn't work very hard. And then, so they were in high school, actually, the oldest ones, when we had our twins. And, we were older, our situation was different. And we actually met some homeschooling families. Like I actually didn't think about homeschooling. I guess I knew it existed back when the big kids were young, but I never even considered it. I didn't know anybody who homeschooled, but then after having the twins, I met some families, and I was one of the biggest things I was impressed with was their relationships that they had within their families, with their parents and with their other siblings. They were polite, they were respectful, they were confident, they could speak to adults, but not with an arrogance, and that just really impressed me. I mean, I met multiple homeschool families and I was like, ooh, I want some of that. Because actually it wasn't that way with our older two. And at the time also my husband was traveling a lot to different countries, and we're thinking, oh, well, we can go with you. You know, if we're homeschooling, we can control our schedule. And so the thought of the flexibility, we really like that as well. And then just also being able to include our faith into their education. At that time, that was becoming important to us. And I actually really liked them, and I didn't want to send them away all day. I wanted to be with them. So those were the main reasons why we homeschooled.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, so let's see. Would one of you mind explaining how you describe your overall approach to homeschooling?
I'm a classical.
Right, but you know, in like 30 seconds.
In like 30 seconds,
Yeah.
explain the whole thing. Okay, I use the classical method, but I will say not strictly. I really suggest that the very first thing you should do as a homeschooler is read and learn about different approaches to education. I highly recommend Kathy Duffy's book. You can find Kathy Duffy's website, but she has a book that used to be available in print at the Leonardtown Library. That's where I picked it up, or maybe I put it on hold. Anyway, she has a question and answer section about what is your student's learning style? What is your teaching style? And she goes through the different educational philosophies, things like Montessori that Carrie mentioned, classical, you can be eclectic, what am I thinking of? Ruth Beechek, where you go out, not Ruth Beechek, oh, ladies help me out. When you go outside and you explore nature and you learn from that.
Charlotte Mason.
Thank you, Charlotte Mason. So when my children were young, I really used a lot of Charlotte Mason, but I also have always wanted to give my kids a liberal arts education. And that, to me, the classical model is the liberal arts and the great books that encompass the great conversation of thought throughout the ages, usually starting with the ancient Greeks. So that's where I really saw growth in my Rachel, the oldest, who is so bright. When you put truly quality literature in their hands and you let them read from some of the greatest minds who have ever written, and you discuss that with them, their mind opens up in a way that's beautiful to behold. And when you take them outside and you let them sit in the grass and explore nature and bring you an inchworm and learn how an inchworm moves because they're observing it, you know, that gave our home so much peace and calm. And it, as Candace already said, changed my children in a completely positive way. We started getting compliments when we went out. Wow. People started saying, you must homeschool, I can tell. And at first I was like, what is that thing? I don't know what that means. And so I'd ask at museums, I'd ask docents when they said that. I was like, what makes you say that? And they said, one, they make eye contact with adults when they speak. Two, they know how to hold a conversation with people of all different ages. They're polite and respectful, and they came already knowing a great deal about the subject matter that we're presenting, like more than most adults do. So those things made me want to keep homeschooling. You know, once we started that summer and we saw that seismic shift in our family's life and in our children, there was no way we would do anything else.
So Carrie, how would you describe your general approach?
At different ages, it's been different. So much like what Angie said, the early years I used a lot of learning by doing. So we did a lot of puzzles and reading and just activity stuff. My kids learned their alphabet and numbers just by putting together puzzles that had the alphabet and numbers on them. And as they got older, I did a bit of Charlotte Mason and the nature stuff, very similar things. I don't have a lot of different to add to that. And as they got older, I did a little bit of classical method at home on my own. I don't have a particular curriculum I use for that. And I don't want to jump ahead because I know that's a next question, so I'll wait on that. But as they got older and into high school, I transitioned to more traditional because I needed to send them out for courses that I knew I wasn't going to be able to teach or wasn't going to do it justice. And so I wanted them to kind of be ready as they transitioned into taking classes at other places and at college. So I, kind of tapered into a more traditional method as they got older, and they could be more independent, learning with the materials on their own that way.
Thank you. And Candace?
I currently also use the classical method, but we didn't start that way. When they were kindergarten and I was doing all the research, one of the things that if you're new to homeschooling, you will find that there's like information overload out there. So be ready for it. But I did not want to do classical to start with because part of a program actually that we do now, but I was against doing it when they were really little because I didn't understand it really. In classical was that they were learning Latin. I'm like, why does my 5-year-old need to learn Latin? And so I was like, no, we're not going to do that. And we used a literature-based program and loved it. It was mostly reading books. All the history we did was through literature. We didn't read a textbook or anything. And the stories were just great. And so we started with a literature-based one, and the classical method is really literature-based also. But then we moved to that probably when they were about 4th grade.
Okay.
So we touched on this a little bit in some of your answers to the last question, but where do you get your curriculum and materials? There's so much out there that you could choose from. Have you used prepackaged curricula? Do you make your own? Do you find it online? Where do you get the stuff to teach with?
Library.
Library. And your check for saying that is in the mail, Carrie. Thank you.
I paid a lot of checks for overdue books. My husband would say, are you sure we can buy that stuff more cheaply than these fines that we're paying? But Candace talked about literature. I did a lot of literature, same thing, did history through literature. So we read a lot of biographies, historical fiction, historical nonfiction. I use the library even for science activity books. They've got a whole lovely section on activity books for any branch of science you could be looking for. And so I always, especially when my kids were small, I used the library as one of my main places to go for things like that. And I would use, there are so many websites. I should have had them. I use Rainbow Resource Center. There's a Christian book distributors that has a lot of Christian books in general, but they have a homeschool link on there, and they have some general curriculum. It's not all Christian. Amazon, sometimes they can find, in more recent years, we've gone to look at Amazon because sometimes we can find better deals there. So pretty much I looked where I could find things the cheapest because of having so many children. But yeah, my early years of homeschooling, and Miss Jill probably remembers, I used to ask her often to use her librarian magic to track down books for me that were out of print or I was having trouble finding, and she often could do that for me when I was looking for something in particular. So it's a great way to do it cheaply when you have young children, is borrow. So.
Somebody in the chat asked if there is a good website for finding good curriculums or maybe even more importantly, not so great curriculums. Are there places that review?
So yes, Carrie just mentioned Rainbow Resource. I'm going to screen share it for a moment. So, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry.
Okay, I don't really have to show it to you, but the Rainbow Resource website, they're Christian, but they're going to give you reviews of all sorts of books, secular. Their catalog is like an old phone book.
Yeah.
Enormous. You need to put on your reading glasses and sit with it for about a month. Anyway, in addition to everything in their catalog is reviewed beautifully. On top of that, I didn't know for years, you could call them and they have experienced homeschool parents who will guide you for free. Who knew? So you can call and they have specialists in the different disciplines. So they have a specialist for math and science, a specialist for language arts and so forth. So their catalog, I don't even know if they print it anymore, but
Yeah.
it's a great place to start, and their website. And then Kathy Duffy's, I think she's up to 110 top picks for homeschool. I mentioned her book earlier. So the book is the top picks, but on top of that, she also helps you learn your method and your students' learning style. And then I would say after you've looked at Kathy Duffy, try to zone in on some favorite methods and maybe publishers. And can I screen share now? Do I have that?
I think you can. I made you a co-host. You should have the screen share button.
Okay, because I was prepared. Oh no, it's not bringing up my web pages. Oh, I know why. Okay, sorry. I am prepared to show you all sorts of things. And try to go fast. Show and tell here. Which one should I start with? Oh my. Okay. Boop.
Zoom is a new technology for all of us.
Well, that's not the right.
Here we go.
That's the old
Here
site.
it goes.
Okay, I'm just gonna give up on the screen share for now. Anyway,
Okay.
I would recommend.
Miss Catherine has been sharing the links in the chat.
That's good. I would thank you. I would recommend, and that's Rainbow Resources linked to Kathy Duffy's book, which is good. But Kathy Duffy has her own website. That's a great place to start. And then once you know your favorite schools, like your favorite umbrella programs, I look at Bethlehem Books. They're not a homeschool provider, but they print outstanding books, outstanding historical fiction in particular. I look at certain academies that I highly respect as classical academies, and I go to their book lists, and I shop their bookstore, and I see what they're using. And I'll tend to find that the best programs are all using the same curriculum, and then I can feel pretty confident that I found the creme de la creme. And to give some specific recommendations, Matthew C., which many homeschoolers use, and you can find them easily online. Matthew C. by Steve Demme. All About Spelling. And what's the other one I wanted to link you to? I have them all opened. Artistic Pursuits. I might want to screen share this one, but you want to look into artistic pursuits. A lot of families skip art, and I believe I didn't say that I have a background in education and psychology, and art is fundamental to your child's development. Please don't skip art or science. And music is fundamental to, it's actually connected in the brain to mathematics. So you really shouldn't skip music either. Artistic Pursuits is phenomenal. They have books for K through 12. They're very easy to use. I only use curriculum I call it pick up and go. If I have to work hard to put something together and build lap books, I'm just not going to do that. I'm being honest with myself. That's going to be a waste of my money because I'm not going to use it. I'd rather use a curriculum that I can pick it up, open to the chapter that I'm on, sit with my student, and move on. Artistic Pursuits, Matthew C., All About Spelling, check those boxes. And they're highly respected. And then for grammar, I use Voyages in English it's actually from a Catholic school program, but the book is secular. There's no religion in the book. So it's just an excellent, nuns write really good grammar books. It's the truth. As someone who went to Catholic school, it's an excellent grammar book, regardless of your faith. So I think that's my top. And then as Carrie already said, a lot of library books. When they were little, I didn't buy books except for a math workbook. I didn't buy anything else. I went to the library. I picked up the Epic of Gilgamesh for children. And I simply structured what I was doing around a program called St. Thomas Aquinas Academy and also around Angelicum Academy. So I would copy their scope and sequence and simply check the books out from the library. So we read Shakespeare for Children by Mary and Charles Lamb when they were small. So by the time my children were actually reading Shakespeare in like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they'd started reading children's Shakespeare books in 2nd, 3rd grade.
Okay, well, thank you, Angie. Candace, did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of where you get your curriculum and materials?
Well, I didn't trust myself as much as Carrie and Angie to be able to just like pull it together. So when we started, I needed a full-on curriculum where it had a guide. It told me exactly what to do. And like I said, I had used a literature-based program, and it was a program called Sunlight. And so I bought the full package, and I'd open the guide. It would say week 1, day 1, week 1, day 2, and it would tell me like what specific pages to read out of each book. And that's what I needed to start, because I was like, I don't know how to do this. I was an engineer, not an education major. So, so we did that program up until we started Classical Conversations, which is obviously a classical program, and it had a basic laid out curriculum as well. So I would often supplement. I would go to homeschool conventions and buy all this extra stuff and then start it and never finish it, because there's so much great stuff out there that you do have to control yourself.
It's hard. You can see the library shelves behind me, and that's just some of them.
Yes, confession, I happen to be personal friends with Angelina as well, and I was deeply jealous when her family moved into a house with an actual library with one of those ladders.
Yeah, it's back.
But of course, I am a librarian, so I love that.
And I will just real briefly say, I started the way Candace did, actually. Yeah. My first year, I read Kathy Duffy. I looked at Rainbow Resources, and I said to myself, gosh, this is overwhelming. I went to my first homeschool conference. It was exciting. It was beautiful. All the curriculum was fantastic. How are you going to pick? So I chose a program called St. Thomas Aquinas Academy, and I think I can screen share them rather easily. Yes, they are Catholic. They are classical, and they are out in California. They are not approved here in Maryland. However, I chose them that first year. I only paid something like $250. Sorry, hang on. And they assessed my children, which was beautiful, because I think the individual who looked at the assessments must have been a PhD in educational psychology. Their assessments were brilliant and simple, and they helped me to understand what my child needed. They guided me as to which curriculum I should choose that year. And they taught me how to, they called it something like a one-room schoolhouse, or how to baby track, so that you could simplify things when you had children who were very close together in age. You didn't have to put them in, your second grader in a second grade history book and your third grader in a third grade history book. You could put them together. There's no reason not to, for science, history, and a number of other subjects. So I learned all of that from them for a very reasonable price. And I had their support. They were just a phone call away through that whole first year of homeschooling. And excuse me, that was truly a blessing. One that I would suggest to anyone. If not their program, then find someone that does that for a low price, guides you, and does assessments.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to try to pick up the pace a little bit. This is all wonderful information, ladies, that you are sharing, but we do need to end at 8 o'clock. So, Catherine, you've got the next question?
Yes. Okay. How do you decide what to teach when?
I followed, you will find if you buy a math book or a reading book, if they're graded like a grade level, first grade, second grade, it's going to kind of space it all out for you. I mentioned when my kids were younger, I did a lot of reading and literature, and I followed a guide. It's called The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Weisbauer and her mom, Jessie Wise. And they have every grade level, recommendations for each subject area. And I used that in my early years to kind of help me decide what, what reading to focus on. Basically, my history, we cycled through ancient history one year, then the Middle Ages and Reformation, Enlightenment the next year. Then we do early world history the third year, and modern world history, American history the fourth year. And then we just recycle back through that in the middle years. And then the high school years, we just did the same cycle, just with more intensity and deeper study. And the same with our sciences. We did a different branch of science. We would do biology one year, and earth and space science one year, then chemistry, and then physics. And again, at elementary and then middle grades and then high school, we did the same cycle, just more in depth each time that we got to it. But the other subjects I did more, a little more mainstream, following a guide that kind of recommended each grade level. Like I said, the Well-Trained Mind was my main guide I used to help me determine what to do in those other subjects for each grade level.
Just briefly, I agree. Well-Trained Mind, I started there, and I use books written by Susan Weisbauer, who Carrie just mentioned. I use Story of the World, especially in elementary school. She was homeschooled, and she's now a college professor. And the website, you can find an incredibly well-written college professor. You can find their website online, and they have like a conversation area. Back in the day, I had a different name. It was almost like old bulletin board system. But from there, that's where I learned about programs like All About Spelling and Math UC and so forth. I think it was called the Hive Mind.
I can't remember.
All right. So our next question, this one is a little sort of more general, but since most of our participants tonight are just looking to start homeschooling this school year, if you could send a message back in time to yourself when you were first getting started, what do you wish you had known back at the beginning with the benefit of years?
I would say that it's more about the heart than academics. If you can capture your child's heart and give them a love for learning, the academics will all come. Don't worry about if your kid is behind. I guess part of that, you might worry if you are homeschooling now intending to send your child back to public school. But in general, sometimes like in school, they will push your child through the math program and your child might not understand it. In homeschooling, you could stop and spend the time reviewing things and doing more practice on certain things so that your kid can actually understand it. That might make them behind, but if they're actually getting it versus just getting pushed through, I think it's better. So don't compare your child to anybody else. Kids learn on different schedules.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing for me is I would tell my early self that they're going to be okay, even if you don't cover everything you set out to cover each year. I think I stressed out way more when my older kids were small, worried that I, wasn't doing enough or just didn't get everything in that I had meant to get in that year. And much like Candace said, sometimes it was just because we went more slowly, or not even that they weren't getting a concept, but they just loved a particular subject. And so we spent a ton of time on it and didn't move on like I thought we would, but they're going to be okay. and also that it goes really, really fast. That sometimes when they're little, you wish that things would go more quickly, or I'm never going to get out of this phase. But coming now, and almost 20 years of doing this, and my youngest will be out of the house in 3 more years. I wish I had not been in a hurry or felt in such a hurry sometimes. So.
I'm going to agree with Carrie and Candace. Give yourself the gift of time. Realize that you have a lot of time. When children are in school, just like Candace said, they're pushed forward. The focus isn't on mastery. And as a homeschooler, especially with math, spelling, grammar, you can focus on mastery. It's one of the reasons I like Math UC and All About Spelling. Homeschoolers outscore traditionally schooled students on most major tests like the SATs, and not by a small margin, by a large margin. And I'm convinced part of the reason for that is the amount of time and attention they're receiving. And the other part is they're allowed to master something before they move on. I would also tell myself that do something over the summer. And when they're young, if you don't touch a school book, a pencil, a math problem over the summer, they're going to come back in September and say, I can't remember how zeros work. This is a true story. Mom, what's 7 times 0? I remember saying to people, if I were a public school teacher, I would want to bang my head up against the wall. If 24 kids were going, I can't remember how zeros work. Anyway, true story. The other thing I learned is M&Ms are like little bits of magic, or Reese's Pieces, but be warned because they don't want to eat them too. If you have a child who doesn't want to learn math, and you have all those blocks, you know, and they're supposed to learn math with the blocks, that's great. But if you sit down and you learn math with M&Ms and you do your multiplication tables with M&Ms or Reese's, and you know, it's kind of like, well, we multiply these and then some for mom, some for you, when you get one right. All of a sudden your kid remembers all the math facts in like 2 days. It really works.
I had one more piece of advice, because, again, I explained that I definitely used something that had a guide that told me exactly what to do. But I think what I would tell myself back then is don't let the guide control me. You know, you need to, it's there for you to use, not for it to control you. So at first I wanted to check all those, I'm a block checker. I wanted to get them all done, but sometimes you just can't. You know, you need to know your kids. You need to make sure your relationship, okay, like just like Angie was saying, she didn't want to yell at her kids in the morning because they just wanted to talk. Don't let your curriculum control you.
Same thing for schedules. The schedule is designed to serve you. You don't serve the schedule. The schedule is not your master. You should have one, but you're allowed to have 6 days or lazy days, PJ days.
Catherine, you have the next question? Oh, Catherine might be frozen. Oh dear. Okay, I'm going to read the next question. Oh, she's back. Okay, good.
I'm back. What is your study space like? How did you set it up? And do you have advice for people setting up their own space for the first time?
I don't know about the other ladies. Our space looked different at different stages. I mean, in the early years, we were all around a kitchen table. My high school years, my daughter's favorite study space was her bed. And she loved to lay on her bed and do her work. Some of my other older kids like to be in their own room with their own desk. But we have spent a lot of years just around our kitchen table. And they all have their own bins, I use little fabric bins that they keep their materials in. And, you know, that's just, we like the family grouping. In early years and even into middle school, we did a lot of read aloud. And in fact, I think I finally stopped reading aloud to my boys every day when they were in 10th grade, just a couple of years ago. And we would do that at lunch. We would sit and I would have a book that I would read aloud to them, and not Dr. Seuss, of course, something more interesting, but we're just very family oriented. So we've been, I know other families do more structured, but for us, that's just a big table where we're all together. Has just worked well for us until, like I said, so my high schoolers branched off and found their own, what was comfortable for them. As long as they were working, I didn't care if they were on their bed or on the sofa or in the floor. As long as they were comfortable and concentrating and getting finished what they needed to do every day. So I think it's, you know, find what works for you, what's comfortable for your family, where all of you can concentrate and focus. And it really doesn't have to be any particular thing or look a particular way.
Real briefly, when the kitchen table, just like Carrie said, and for structuring the space, I just used IKEA type book, like cubbies, because being that nice little square, all your books don't fall over and slide out on the floor. And cups, just get an empty mason jar, an empty wash out an old salsa jar, and stick your pencils and things in it. Does not have to be complicated. It doesn't even have to cost anything. And then, like Carrie was just saying, let them kind of choose their own space to some extent when they're older. But when they're little, my son has ADHD and he cannot sit still. He cannot physically sit still for any period of time, long enough to do math and spelling, and that's it. So we would listen to Jim Weiss history CDs, and he would somersault around the floor, and he learned a ton of history. And then with math, I would get out a drum set or like a music set, that little Melissa and Doug comes in the drum, and they'd shake maracas and walk around the border of my rug, kind of chanting, singing their math facts. It works really well. And when your whole body is engaged in what you're doing, you can't be distracted. You have to think about what you're saying. And the math fact's going to stick, or spelling words, because all your other modalities are busy, shaking a maraca, walking, whatever, thinking about the rhythm. So don't believe that they have to just sit still. Some people use bouncy balls to sit on.
So Candace, how about your family?
Yeah, so we've luckily always had a dedicated homeschool space. We were able to do that. However, we didn't usually always do school in there. It was nice to have that place though where all of our books were, so that we could easily find them. So, but my advice probably to especially new homeschoolers is whatever space you're going to use, have it be on the main floor, especially if your kids are young, because you're going to have to go, get lunch made or clean up the breakfast dishes or just do life. And it's just better if you're, again, when they're young, at least to be kind of closer to them. They will likely get off task if you step out of the room, or they might just have a simple question that you don't necessarily need to look at their schoolwork to be able to answer, which you can yell from the kitchen. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Try to keep it on the main floor.
If it's okay, I'm going to skip ahead because there's a few questions that I want to make sure we get to, and then still leave a few minutes for the questions from our audience. A big one is, what do you do for subjects that you don't feel confident being the teacher for? For me, that would be calculus. For everybody, it might be something else. I know I saw we had a question in the chat about teaching music if you don't know music yourself. So how do you approach that?
I didn't need to look outside of our home until my kids got to high school, and then I use my down subject is science. I'm not strong in science, which that may make you laugh, Miss Jill, because I've been the homeschool science coordinator for like 12 years. I love science. I'm just not very strong in the subject. So once they got to high school, we use a local tutorial. It is a Christian group. It is called California Christian Tutorial. And I enrolled them. They have tutors, and you pay, and the tutor teaches them and grades their work, and they have a syllabus, and it's great preparation for college at that level, because they get a syllabus. They meet one day a week, and they have to, they know the assignments that are due the next class, and they have to organize their time during the week to get all of those things ready for the next class period. So I use that, and I used also Matthew C. I think that was Angelina that mentioned that. Matthew C. is great. I have a math minor, but if you don't use some of that higher math, you don't retain it very well. And also it was timely as my older kids were getting into that higher math, and I was still dealing with my younger kids. I didn't always have the time to spend teaching them and helping them with it. So Matthew C. is a video. They have videos that come along with it. So the kids can watch the lesson themselves. They could reread the lesson in the teacher manual. It was written in a way that the kids can understand it. So if they didn't quite get it from the video, they could look at the manual. And then we have the benefit of Dad is an engineer. So if all else fails, when Dad comes home, they can get help from Dad. So those were my two subjects, and that's kind of how we handled that at home.
Candace, what is your approach to any topics you're not feeling strong in yourself?
Personally, I mentioned I'm an engineer, so in the sciences and the math I can do okay. This year, actually, my children are doing Shakespeare and poetry, which I'm a little nervous about. However, the way I look at it is I'm the lead learner in the house. I just try to I can't always keep up with them though. They are much quicker, they learn quicker and they're sharper than I am. However, I can still engage with them and learn some. One of the nice things I think, especially if you start your kids young in homeschooling, is that they get pretty independent pretty quickly. I think probably starting about fourth grade, I didn't actually teach my girls math. I mean, I could teach them math, but they took the math book and they read it and they did the problems. If they had any issues, they would ask me. But that's a nice thing with homeschooling is that they learn how to learn on their own. So they're pretty independent. Right now, they do math online just because I couldn't keep up with the grading, and so they do it right online and it grades it for me. It's not that I couldn't teach it, but I just couldn't keep up with it.
Okay. Let's see. One last one, and I know we're almost out of time, but we'll go a few minutes longer if that's okay with you, ladies, to answer some of the Q&A from the participants. The last one I wanted to ask you is, what are reviews like? You have to do 2 to 3 reviews a year, either through an umbrella group or through the school board. What's it like, and how should families be preparing for their first one?
I go through the county. I always have. And I was nervous about it first because we first started homeschooling in Texas where you didn't have to do anything. So when I moved here, I was very nervous about it. I brought way too much stuff to my first review. But really, you get contacted by the St. Mary's County Public School homeschool liaison to schedule an appointment for a review, and we meet at the libraries. They have specific reviewers. You really only get like 15 minutes per child, so it goes pretty quick. They're spending their time, listening to you, filling out their form to ensure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is if you read the COMAR, it just says that you need to be doing, regular and thorough instruction in, I believe it's like 6 subjects or something like that. And so I just bring, actually, again, because I'm like a list maker, I actually print out and put everything that we do under each subject, and I don't give that to them. I just tell them. I will bring books and samples of their work. At this point, I don't even have time to show them samples, barely. But one of the biggest things is make sure your children date their work, so that you can, I usually bring something from the beginning of the semester, middle, and then the end for each subject. If they do big projects, I actually just take pictures of them and bring them, just tell them what they've done. And it's quick. The reviewers are very pleasant and nice, and I've never had any kind of issue.
Angie or Carrie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I had the same experience with the county when I was under the county. I did that until my oldest son started high school. And then I did not want to have to create transcripts and diploma on my own. So I joined an umbrella school at that point, and they charge a flat fee per family, no matter how many kids you have. So I just rolled all my kids into the umbrella school. And so it's been quite a while since I've been with the county, but I had a very same kind of experience as Candace. I never had any issues with them. They were always very nice. I brought a binder. I didn't tend to bring my textbooks. I would bring a binder for each of my kids. and have dividers for each subject. And I still do that now with my umbrella school. And I do the same thing, just something from early in the year, middle of the year, and towards the end of the year to show each subject and show the progress. And I just put dividers, just like your kids use in their notebooks. I just put a divider for each subject and put a few samples. And the umbrella school I'm a part of is a Christian one. It's called Churchville Christian School. But they have the same requirements as the county, basically, especially for high school, though, because they're Christian, they do require Bible, I think 3 Bible subjects through the course of their high school years. But other than that, they require pretty much what the county does. And I submit all the materials to them after my review. I just meet with another person in the county who is a Churchville member, and we review each other and sign off. And it's very much honor system. You're signing that you saw that they did what they're supposed to be doing, and they do that for you, and we send it in, and I send in the grades, and they send me back this lovely transcript, and at graduation time they send me a very nice diploma for my kids. So that's kind of where we are, what's worked for my family.
I do exactly what Carrie and Candace have just described. I've always used the county reviewers. It's free, it's easy. They're lovely ladies, all of whom I've met. Some have even homeschooled their grandchildren. The only feedback I ever received, the only advice, was make sure your child puts their name and date at the top of the page. I only have 2 kids in the class. I know whose work it is. But so that was good for me, though. I needed to know that. When they're checking your review, they don't know if you're turning in someone else's work from last year just to make it look good. So that was the only bit of advice.
And it's also good. That's also good practice if they're going to take classes outside the home.
And know how to write your name and stand in line. I also run a homeschool co-op, and we have a few funny little jokes. Homeschoolers don't know how to stand in line, so you have to teach them to line up when they first join co-op.
All right, thank you. So we are now past 8 o'clock, so I think we have caught many of the questions that people have submitted in chat. Our panelists have been answering in the chat. If anybody has a burning question that they want to try to answer in the next few minutes, if you can use the Q&A button that's near the bottom center of your Zoom screen and submit your question, we'll read it to the panelists. So I think we've now covered this, but Rebecca had asked if in your experience are the pros and cons to using the county versus umbrella groups. I think we've pretty well covered that.
I will say the diploma in high school. So now that my oldest is a junior, I might go with Churchville or some other program that would issue a diploma. Yeah. You don't have to do that, but it's comfortable for a lot.
That was really honestly the only reason I did it. I was perfectly comfortable under the county. A lot of people don't like to be. I know, especially a lot of people that are a lot of Christian families, Catholic families, they don't want to be under the oversight of the county. That never bothered me. I was perfectly happy. I just am not I'm not a computer person. I'm not great on the computer, and I did not want to have to, and now I think I told you I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Now there are so many programs out there where you can make probably your own great looking transcript and diploma, because honestly, Churchville, even though they make a diploma, it's not a state accredited diploma. So it's no different than what you could create on your own and print out at home on your own. It's no more, it holds no more clout. But with that said, I don't know if anybody is looking at homeschooling older kids. I've never had a problem with, my kids have never had a problem with applying to colleges with our, not accredited diploma and transcripts from a non-accredited school. Nobody's ever asked. My oldest son even got admitted to the Coast Guard Academy. They never cared that he was homeschooled and that he had a non-accredited diploma. It just wasn't an issue. I think homeschooling's been around long enough now. There's enough of them across the country that it's not a concern. It's not been an issue. Yes.
Ashley asked, how do you document for gym? So how do you show regular, thorough instruction for physical education?
They're not picky. You can write down that they go biking, they play soccer, they swim. And to be honest, that's true of music as well. If your child this might not be happening currently, but under normal circumstances, they might be in the church choir, singing at services, that counts. They might be taking piano lessons, all of those things count. Yeah, it's not hard. And also for music and for health, you don't need to do a full curriculum necessarily. You can do something simple like the library. You'd think we were paid to advertise for you all. We weren't, I assure you.
Well, we did handpick our homeschool panel.
That's true. We were handpicked. But the library has books called, now that I've made this joke, I can't remember. The Classical Composers, Jill. Classics for Kids. What's it called?
Mm-hmm.
Classics for Kids. Okay.
I'm not going to think of it either, but yeah, we have a whole music section, and there's biographies of many of the classic
I'm thinking of
composers with activities.
The ones that are online, and sometimes they perform at the Kennedy Center. They have one called like Mr. Beethoven Lives Upstairs, and there'll be a movie.
Yes.
Is that what it's called? Classical Kids? There's one about.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. They have a video.
Yeah, Beethoven Lives Upstairs was the first one, and there's like 4 or 5.
Exactly. So ask your librarians, they'll know. But you can count that as your music curriculum when they're young. And when they're a little older, you could put them in lessons.
Yeah. Well, even with help, you can, when they're little especially, talking to them about nutrition or brushing your teeth and, you know, personal hygiene and things like that count as health, especially when they're little. Since I have high schoolers, I have actually decided they should do a health. I am doing a curriculum, but I just have been having them do that over the summer.
You know, I just always wrote a paragraph when my kids were young for PE or music and art. I would write a paragraph about the activities we did. We didn't use a particular curriculum. I used similar books to what Angelina's talking about, the composers, and we would incorporate that in our history, whatever history time period we were studying. We'd read about composers and artists of that time period, and we'd listen to music. We'd try to do some art projects that were similar style, you know, to a particular artist. So I rarely bought any curriculum like that. I rarely spent money on stuff like that, because the library just has great resources you can use for those things.
I see Angie just going to the shelf and grabbing another example.
It's nice when you know where they are, too.
Speaking of resources from the library, I do want to invite everybody. This was only part 1 of a 2-parter. So next week on Wednesday night, sorry, Thursday night was already taken, we're going to be having a session on library resources for homework and homeschool. And I'm dropping into the chat the registration link. This one will not feature our fabulous panelists. We thank you so much for your contributions tonight, ladies. But this will be Miss Catherine and I sharing lots of great resources that you can get through the library's online offerings, and also some things, physical items that you can borrow from the library as well to basically build your curriculum and work with your kids, including, let me tease this, we have some resources specifically for art and music that are interactive online lessons that are free with your library card. So register for next Wednesday if you want to learn more. But Angie, I cut you off. What did you want to share with us? And then we'll have this be our last item.
No,
I
was
overtime.
Saying that your health book might be really skinny. You know, you don't have to do anything. Health is not a separate subject in the schools usually. It's just incorporated into phys ed and science. So you don't need to show that you've covered a great deal in health.
And if you have young kids, when you go to their regular dental visits, my pediatric dentist was great about just giving them, talking to them a little more about some dental health things for me, just so I could write a paragraph and say, here's what we learned at our dental, here's what the dentist talked to us about at our dental visit this week, and have them help you plan menus and snacks, and talk about food groups as they help you do that. Just really simple everyday life things that are good life skills for them too, and they can count towards your curriculum for those subjects. So
that's field trips. Field trips count, and you should list them on your review. And you can always plan your field trips around what you're studying, and watch the well, now everything's closed, but watch the Smithsonian's websites, because they'll host all sorts of interesting activities for homeschoolers and for families. There'll be homeschool days at St. Mary's City. When my children were little and we were studying our first round in elementary school of ancient history, we went to Freer Sackler Gallery and we made our own cuneiform tablets as we studied Hammurabi's codes and things like that. So really neat.
All right, well, we are at 11 minutes past the hour, so I want to thank our panelists. I know you can't see everyone at home, but we're all going to clap for you ladies for sharing your expertise and experience with us. And thank you to all the participants for asking really good questions. And so again, next Wednesday, we'll be going in depth into some library resources to support your homeschooling. Also, this event tonight was recorded, so if you want to go back and listen again, it'll be on the library's YouTube within a couple of days. And we're also, Ms. Catherine and our panelists have been sharing a lot of links to the resources we discussed in the chat. We'll collect all of those, and we have everyone's email from your registration, and we'll share all of those in an email. It may not come out until next week, but you will receive that from us so that you can follow up on all the things we discussed tonight. Thank you, everybody, and we appreciate your time. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
It was good, Jill and Catherine. Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this.